So now that we've imported our data from Excel into Power Query Editor, we will now be looking at doing some work on cleaning up our data. So let's just give a bit of an overview of Power Query Editor. So as I mentioned before, Power Query Editor, as the name suggests, is the back end of Power BI. And this is where you do import all your data that you're going to be using for your models. So if we look on the left-hand side here, we've got our queries, and all this is actually all, if you see, it's all the data that we've imported. Here's all the columns of data. So if we go back, let's look at our cash flow data. Here's all the columns. You can slide to the right. On the right-hand side here, you've got properties. So that's the name of the tab that we've imported. You can change that name if you want. For example, you can call that cash flow data. And if you click enter, you'll see what happens if you change that name, it will change here. But for the purpose of this course, we're going to just change it back. Under applied steps, all this is when we make changes to this data, it will record all the steps here. So it's typically like a VBA in Excel. It records all your steps. And once you've done these steps, each time that you bring in new cash flow data, as an example, it will apply those cleaning steps and transformational steps automatically, which means you don't have to do it again. So a lot of setup work that you're doing here now it's once off, unless you're adding new accounts to your income statement, cash flow, balance sheet. But in essence, you should only have to do this cleaning and transformation once. So you spend a lot of time on your data preparation. Will save you a lot of time going forward. All right. So what we're going to do now, and so at the top here, you've got all your menu items. So this is where you're doing cleanup and transformation of your data. You can set some conditions, and there's some inherent tools that we're going to use. We're not going to use all the features here. This is not a Power Query Editor course. We're just going to be using some of its features, but by the end of this course, you'll get a good feel of what Power Query can do. All right, so what we're going to do, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at let's look at our cash flow data. Now, if you look at this table here, this is what we call a table. If you can see, the header has got column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now that's pretty meaningless. We don't want that. We actually want those headers. You can see the headers on row 1. And the reason why that happens is that when you import an Excel spreadsheet, it by default puts it on row 1. That's the reason for that. So what the first thing we want to do is we want to move this as the row header. So what we do is you highlight row 1, and then you go to your home tab and you click on use first row as headers. You just click on that and you'll see what happens. It's moved it from row 1 to the header. You can see here's all my headers. So we're going to do that for our income statement data. Also, there's the header. We're going to do the same. We're going to do the same with the balance sheet. Okay, so going back to our cash flow. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Now, each column has got a different format, and each one's giving us different information. So as you can see, typically, if you know Excel pivot tables, this is typically what a pivot table looks like. So you've got your items, you've got your type, and then all your dates going horizontally, and with all the values. Now, the key thing about Power BI is Power BI needs to have data in columns. So, for example, it does not like it when the dates are going across. The dates need to be going down vertically. Now, the best way to do that is holding Control. I'll show you different ways of doing it. Holding your Control in your keyboard, and then you select Type. So highlight those two columns, and then what you do is anywhere on this tab here, you click right click, and then you say unpivot other columns. We're going to do this a few times so you get a hang of it. and you'll see what happens. So all that Power BI is now done is transformed it from a pivot. It's unpivoted the pivot table, if I can put it as simple as that. We've got now all our items. We've got our top, and we've actually got our here going down. And then we've got the values. Okay, so what I can do now is we can actually now rename that. We call that here. We can rename, we can just double click there and you call that values, just top values. So that's the unpivoting we've done. So as you scroll down, you'll see you've got your duplicate line items, but you've got the values for each year going down. And that's the way Power BI likes to see your data, the format of your data structure. The next step we're going to do is we're going to actually now just make sure that the data is the right format. And what I mean by that is if you click on cash flow items, if you click on this little tab here at the top left, it says, you click on that, it gives you all the different options. Now what we want to do is we want to show cash flow statement items as a text. So you can see by default, it's ABC, which is right. Power BI query editor, what it usually does is when it imports data, it by default creates the data type formats, but it doesn't always get it right. For example, you'll see on here as an example, we don't want to show that as a text. We actually want to show that as a date. So we're going to change that to date. We change it to, so now it's a date format. That's the way we want. Values, I'm happy with that. We can actually just maybe make that, let's make that whole numbers. So again, you just click on the top left on a column, just click on whole numbers. And then top, leave that as text. So that's fine. So you can see the structure looks a lot better. So what we've done up to now is we've moved first row to headers. We've unpivoted the columns to move our here in as a column, as a separate column. And we've changed the formats of our data type. So now we're going to do the same with the income statement. We've already moved it to the top. I'm gonna hold down Control and select top. What we're going to do is we're going to unpivot it. There's another way you can actually do it. If you highlight, we can actually do that. Let's do it this way. Okay, so it's fine. So let's do it the same way. So Control, holding Control, click Tab, and then we're going to unpivot. Right click, unpivot other columns. We've got all that, so that's looking good. Okay, again, check all your format is right of your data columns. So that's text, that's fine. Type is text, it's fine. We're going to rename this to year. And then we're going to change this to date. We change this to values. And we're going to make that whole number. So as you can see now, if you go to top and you go to view, make sure that your column quantity is ticked. And there's a reason for that. If we look here, it's actually saying that there's an error in this table. You can actually see there's a little red button here. Red. There's a red there as well. So let's scroll down and see if we can spot anything. Now what you can see here, there's an error. It's picked up an error. And the only reason it's doing that is if we go back to our source sheet, what is happening is that when we copied and pasted the raw data, it picked up dashes, and Power BI doesn't recognize that dash as a value. So all we're going to do now is we're just going to replace those values. We're actually going to just remove them. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click. And we're going to say remove errors. And when you see, once you've done that, it actually cleans it up, and all the column quantity, all the bars here are green. So we know we're good to go. There's no errors. You can see valid 100%, 100%, 100%, and 100%. So we know our data is clean. So let's check we're happy with that. Great. So let's just check with that. There's no, see here, if we go to our cash flow, there's also errors there. So all we're going to do is we're going to right click, remove errors to clean up the data. So we're happy with that. You can see it's nice and clean now. And we're going to do the same with the balance sheet once we've cleaned it up. Okay, so again, holding control. And there we want to select those 3 columns. What we need to do is right click, unpivot other columns. Change that to here. Change that to values. And I check that your data column formats is right. So that's text, that's fine, that's text, that's fine, that's text. We want to change year to date. And we want to change values to whole number. Okay, and you'll see again there's an error. We just fix the error. We right click, remove errors. Okay, happy with that. Great, so we've cleaned up the first 3 tabs. Let's look at our IS. So in this instance, our index column, our column headers are right. But what we want to do is we want to remove any redundant columns. And the way we do that is you can just highlight that column and hold in Shift and right. We don't need to see all this. So we just right click. Once we've highlighted all those columns, we can just say remove columns. There we go. So that's nice and clean. It's always nice to have your data nice and clean when you import it into Power BI. We're going to do the same with the balance sheet. Make sure we're happy with it. So that we're happy with the headers. We're happy with the formatting. So all that looks good. I'm going to again just remove the columns. Okay, and that's good to go. There's no errors. Perfect. We're going to look at our cash flows template. Also, the headers look fine. The format looks fine to me. We're going to just highlight, Shift, right, remove all these columns we don't need. And there's no errors, which I'm happy with. And then setup should be fine. We can just delete those 3 that we don't need. All right, so I think that's about it that we need to do on the data cleanup for now. I haven't spotted any unusuals or any other things we need to do. There may be some formatting changes we can do at a later stage, but for now I think we should be good to go. So this was a quick introduction to Power Query Editor as part of the course. As you can see, the data looks in a very different format than what we brought it in when we imported it from Excel. So just to recap, we've got all our queries on the left-hand side, so all our tables. Here's the table format with all the detail. We've spoken about the column quality to make sure that there's no errors. We've looked at how to remove errors just by right-clicking and removing errors if they are. We've looked at unpivoting the tables to get them in, to get your dates. It's very important to get your dates into a vertical format. That's very important. So we've unpivoted tables. We've actually renamed tables as well. We just double click them, we renamed them. We can also change the name of the properties of the tables if we want to, but we haven't done it for this course. And you can see here's all the steps that it's recorded. So if you look at cash flow, the first step was to get the source data. So you can see there's my file path where I got my source data from. Then what we did was, you see if I click on each one, it will show you where we went and what we did. Promoted headers, what we did is we moved it to the header. You can see there's a step. Then what we did is we changed the type. Then if you remember, we unpivoted the column, so it shows you all the steps that we've done. We've renamed it, we changed the type there, and then we also removed the errors. So you can see from the beginning right to the end, you can see all the steps we've done. And Power BI records this, So all these applied steps will be applied every time that you bring in new data from Excel into Power Query Editor. So that's the great thing, is you don't have to do this again. And the same with the income statement. There's all our steps that we've done. Income statement data, same with the balance sheet. Here's our income statement template. Again, obviously we've done a few steps. If you remember, there's the source. We also promoted, we didn't promote the headers. Power BI did that automatically. And what we did is we removed the columns in the template. And then we wrapped up with a setup. We didn't do any transformation. We actually did some transformation there. We just removed the columns. But Power BI in this instance also automatically promoted headers. It doesn't always do that. So if it doesn't do that, then you use that function of use first row as headers. So it's always important to have your headers correct. If it shows column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and so on and so forth, and you know it's incorrect, you need to promote your first row as to headers. Right, so I think that's a good overview of our data preparation in Power Query Editor. We will now pull that into Power BI front end, where we're going to start doing some data modeling.